Now, for more on this discussion, we're now joined by energy expert Matthew Cruz. Matthew, thank you so much for joining us this evening. Now, Matthew, there was a time when the mention of stage 8 seemed preposterous. And some in true South African humor joked and had said, we are approaching a stage where Eskom officials will come into your homes and blow out your candles. Now we're talking about stage 16. I mean, what is that?
Great. Hello, and thank you for having me on the show. So basically, stage 16 is the stage when you don't receive any electricity for the whole day. So the stages of load shedding used to go up to stage 8 until we started hitting the time when we actually started hitting stage 8, but not officially according to Eskom. We would hit stage 8 in terms of the number of hours that the power went out, as we saw from Chris Yilland when he mentioned that on Twitter, and also stage 8 in terms of the number of megawatts that have come off the grid, previously in both November and August last year. So we hit stage 8 unofficially, and that's then, apart from many other things, prompted NERSA to provide now an updated schedule up to stage 16, where at stage 16 you have no power, but at stage 8 you have power for only half the day.
I mean, when does it end? In 2010, the request was stage 4. 2019, the request was for stage 8. Now here we are in 2024, the request is for stage 16. Is it going to be every 4 years that we're doubling this figure?
Well, yeah, that's interesting, because beyond stage 16, where do you go? Interestingly, there is theoretically possible higher stages in stage 16, where at stage 24, for example, every second day you will then have power for 8 hours of the day, on every second day. So just because the stages have been increased in terms of their definition now, it doesn't necessarily mean that we're actually going to go above stage 8 or up to stage 16. It's merely a preparatory and precautionary measure that's being taken from NERSA to be able to handle things in a well-structured and informed way if we did happen to go above stage 8. And unfortunately, I do see us having a possibility of going above stage 8 within the next 3 years. It's very difficult to confirm exactly when and how it will happen, but given the aging power stations and the decline in the ability for Eskom to produce years ago. In that context, a declining trend of energy availability factor and aging power stations, we will potentially see above stage 8 coming within the next 3 years. So we will need to have a framework for the country to understand what to do in that situation. This is the framework that has come about now from NERSA.
Matthew, I also think many of us are still stuck on the part where you mentioned a possibility of a stage 24 where we could not have electricity every second day. What is the actual issue here? I thought if we are to listen to the Minister of Electricity, Kgosientsho Ramokgopa, and the President Ramaphosa as well, they seem to say, look, we are getting a hold of this. Eskom is getting back on track. But if we're making provision for a possibility of a stage 16 and even stage 24, are we really making progress?
Yeah, it is interesting to see the fancy footwork that's been taking place. The electricity minister, as famously in that load shedding will be a thing of the past in a year and a half at the end of 2023. And he said the same in 2019 and 2015 as well. So there's been fancy footwork, and at the moment, thankfully, we do have no load last week, and this record of no load shedding. It is up to the elections in May. So we've been seeing increased firing of diesel-fired turbines, so 4 out of 7 days diesel being fired 2 weeks ago. And also a decrease in the planned maintenance that was taking place. So leading up to, usually you wait until winter, which has kind of been preemptively early, where they reduce the amount of planned maintenance that's taking place in order to bring units back online quicker so that we can have some kind of stability just for these 2 months. So in terms of my analysis, what I've been seeing is a projection going forward after the May elections. I do see once again load shedding doubling from the stages that we are seeing at the moment. So it's average stage 1, stage 2. I expect stage 3 and 4 to come within the months following the elections. And unfortunately, from what I've seen in terms of the energy availability factor improvement, we were meant to be at 65% according to the Energy Action Plan by March of this year. We're not there. We're sitting at 55%. So we're way under the mark in terms of the ability for Eskom to generate power. What has been happening, however, is there's been a lot of local and private power coming onto the grid from private players. So businesses taking energy needs into their own hands, getting solar, reducing their electricity bills, and also households. So there's been a reduction in demand through people getting solar, but also, unfortunately, a reduction in demand through businesses going out of business during the energy crisis. And this is two aspects. The demand has decreased because of these two aspects, but we haven't had generation increasing from Eskom side. So whenever I hear the government saying we've made load shedding go away, we've made improvements, I'm like, well, a lot of businesses have gone out of business and a lot of businesses have also gotten solar, and you haven't really introduced any additional electricity generation from Eskom. So what actually have you been doing? We have seen a great effort in terms of the tax benefits for businesses. That's been very great to get solar. But apart from that, there's been a delay in terms of what could be done. Something that I think should be done is a feed-in tariff should be implemented nationally. This was seen to great effect in Vietnam. Within 6 months, they were able to incentivize 9,000 megawatts or 9 stages of load shedding coming onto the grid with feed-in tariff. So I await seeing that from governments.
Speaking of the fancy footwork as well, tell us a bit about the National Rationalized Specifications Association of South Africa. Who was it comprised of? What is it, and why was it formed? Or is this another one of those talk shops?
So no, it wasn't just a talk shop exercise that was from the government. It was to inform and advise about these new regulations that are coming up, that have been now confirmed and implemented by NERSA. So they were one of the committees that was feeding in information. And something that came about from that, interestingly, is we now have guidelines on how customers that have agreed to do load curtailment will be dealt with for the different stages of load shedding. Before it was a bit opaque, it wasn't very well known publicly, but now it's in the new regulations. And what that means is a big opt in to being a load curtailment customer instead of being subject to load shedding. So what that means at stage 1 and 2, you'll reduce your overall load by 10%. Up to stage 10, you'll then reduce your load by 50%, but you won't have no electricity. You'll just reduce your amount of electricity you're using. This is also being seen with houses that have smart meters. There was a pilot that was done in Fourways in Joburg, and now homes will also get the option to, instead of being subject to load shedding, they'll be able to curtail their load. So that's one of the outcomes of the committee providing input and providing their advice and consulting input and recommendations to NERSA. And this is what has come about from these committees providing this information.
Well, let's end it on that positive note of some sort of solutions coming for this energy crisis. Thank you so much, Matthew, for your time. That was energy expert Matthew Cruz.